Hi, I'm Tristan Miller, and you're listening to Positive and Negative, a podcast about the intersectionality between mental health and the arts. Today on the program, I speak with Ashley Jaye, who is a writer, performer, and mental health advocate, about her experience with borderline personality disorder and depression. Here she is talking about navigating mental health issues while being creative.
I still do navigate it on my own when it comes to my creativity. How I do that is sometimes I actually utilize a technique that I learned from the group, and when I'm having just a really horrible mental health day where I can't even lift a foot out of bed, sometimes I'll just start talking to myself and just record myself talking to myself. And when I'm ready to listen to it, I'll listen back to it. And sometimes it sparks creativity, and sometimes it's just a moment of reflection for me. And what I want to say here is that it's totally okay if you don't feel creative. Like, you don't always need to monetize every single thing that you do. You don't need to monetize your hobbies all the time. And if it's a day where your creativity is just like, you just just let it be. And the more that you focus on being more gentle with yourself during that time, your creativity will come back. Like, it will come back because you are taking care of yourself so that your mind is ready to be open for that creative opportunity.
This podcast is made possible by Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Tristan J. Miller to support us there and receive early access to the rest of this season, along with unedited versions of the interviews, as well as a myriad of other content for and about mental health. Our music is by Billy Conahan. It's To Be or Nah off the album Leaping with Intent to Fly, available wherever fine music is sold. All right, let's get to this interview. Hey, Ashley, how are you today? Thank you for being on.
Thanks, Tristan. I'm doing good. How about you?
We're all keeping on. I feel like it's the most generous we can be at this point.
Right.
Yeah, but you're primarily an actress, right? Or actor, whatever. You act.
I do act. Yeah, I do act. Full time, I actually do social media marketing, and I do
cool.
solo performance on the side.
Very nice. Very nice. What got you into like acting and solo performing?
Well, I've always been interested in it since I was a kid. Like, I really loved watching Disney Channel shows, like That's So Raven or
Yeah.
Lizzie McGuire. And every time I watched TV, I was like, ooh, I want to be on there. Like, I want to be there. And ever since then, in high school, middle school, actually, I started taking theater classes. And that was like my first experience being on stage. And I had like this role of like playing like this sparkling fish.
That's amazing.
Thank you. I have no idea what it was linked to at all, but I just remember playing the sparkling fish. And I remember as soon as I got up on stage and had to say my lines, like I was like, this is where I belong. And so, I started taking theater classes in high school. And then I stopped taking theater classes in college, but I got involved with speech and debate. And through speech and debate, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but they're actually two different things. So speech and debate isn't what you see on like TV or like the great debaters, like type of thing. Like, that's strictly debate, but the speech side is sort of like monologues. Like, they have like a lot of creative avenues there. Like, you can do poetry, you can do prose, you can do what is it? You could do prose, you could do poetry, or you could do sort of like a mixture of the two. Oh, and then there's also one called dramatic interpretation, which
Oh
is
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, which is like the traditional monologues that you see. But the speech side of speech and debate is where I utilized what I learned from like high school and middle school
Mm-hmm.
drama classes, and kind of went into that realm.
Mm-hmm.
Then from there, out of college, just from working and staying connected with my speech and debate teammates and coaches, one of my coaches actually participated in what's called Solo Sundays out here in San Francisco, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw her perform a one woman show through Solo Sundays. And afterwards, I went out to dinner with her, and she was like, you should try it. And I was like, what? And she's like, I was like, I don't know if I could do that. She's like, yeah, you just write your own thing and you just go up there and perform. I was like, oh no, I can't do that. And she was like, well, you did speech, And I said, but like, that was already material that was written that I just had to memorize. Like, I didn't have to like actually write it and come up with like the ideas and the direction and all that. And she's just like, go for it. And so I did. And I was like, this is where I belong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. Couple things. One, you say this is where I belong. You said it twice. Did you have a feeling prior to that of like not belonging anywhere else?
Oh, yeah. And I would definitely say I've had that feeling of feeling like an outsider pretty much most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I mostly attribute it to one, my environment, and two, sometimes, like my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And so first with my environment, I grew up upper middle class. So I lived in the suburbs pretty much all my life. And most of the suburbs that I grew up in were predominantly white, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm Black.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always like the one of two Black kids in class. Whenever slavery was talked about in class, a teacher would call on me and ask me to talk
Cool.
about it.
Cool.
Yeah, I was like, this is really awkward. It's not too cool for me.
Yeah.
Being like the only Black kid in class, trying to explain slavery to these other kids when I'm trying to learn about it.
Yeah.
And
Oh boy.
and so just constantly just being like the only Black kid and sometimes the only person of color in the room, I constantly felt like an outsider. And the second context that I've also felt like an outsider is through my mental health. So I have 3 mental health diagnoses. So first, I have borderline personality disorder, then I have PTSD, and then I have depression.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, depression now, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, this is digestible. Like depression, anxiety, this is a problem. But in terms of like PTSD and especially borderline personality disorder, like not a lot of people are really aware of these or like fully understand BPD and PTSD. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard for people to connect with me and for me to like connect with other people, since the symptoms, especially surrounding BPD, are misunderstood.
Yeah. That makes sense. Would you mind talking a little bit about what those symptoms are?
Yeah, sure. So I know there's 9, and I don't remember all 9, so I'll probably just list the ones that are
Oh, how dare
relevant to
you?
me.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, oh, where's my lab coat so I can like remember all these symptoms?
You did research for an interview about you. Come on. Yeah.
I know. I'm such a bad interviewee. Um, so there's 9 symptoms of BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, and so the ones that I can remember are disassociation, unstable sense of self, emotional dysregulation or sort of unstable mood swings, self-harm, suicidality, impulsivity, and there's one more, but I'm forgetting it. I think it
Yeah.
kind of goes with like hopelessness or something, but I got you 6, so
Yeah, not bad. That's
like
I think a passing grade, right?
yeah, like 6 out of 9, like
Yeah, that
push
ain't
pass.
bad. That ain't bad. It's
Yeah.
not your job either.
Right.
You're, yeah. And when did those symptoms start to manifest with you?
Mine started to show up in high school. And but in high school I didn't and neither did my family have the language for it. And I should also mention that I also grew up in a religious family as well.
Mm,
So I grew up in a Christian household, and we're also Black. And in Black culture, religion is essentially like one of our foundations. Like it's essentially a part of our culture. And so in Black culture, not only do we not want to talk about what's going on mentally, but like when it comes to religion, any sort of like negative emotion that anybody is experiencing, we tend to throw at them like, oh, just pray about it, God's got it,
mm-hmm.
And so when my symptoms started showing up in high school, my parents were just like, oh, well, she's just being dramatic, just let's just make sure she goes to church every day, that she prays. And what also didn't help was that I was a straight A student. So, nobody suspected the straight
Sure.
A student to, be acting out or sort of have these sort of withdrawal like symptoms or these really unstable mood swings. And what also came into play too is that, during high school, puberty and all that, they all my mood swings were always attributed just to my period, so just PMS, like, oh, she's
Mm-hmm.
just she's probably just on her period.
Mm-hmm.
But there was actually something deeper going on that didn't get uncovered until after I graduated college.
And how did you begin to uncover all of those? Like, what was actually going on in and around? You said college, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what was the process of like getting a diagnosis for you?
In order for me to get the diagnosis, what had to happen was I actually had to attempt at my life in order to
Oh
get
my
it.
gosh.
Now, I don't say that exaggeratingly, like I didn't think at the time, oh, something's mentally going on with me. Let me attempt so
Mm-hmm.
people can take me seriously. Like that's not what my thought process was at
Yeah,
all.
that wasn't my assumption either, but thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. As us, like neurodivergents, like we get it, but like I just want to make sure we clarify that
Absolutely.
for our neurotypicals. So that
100%.
wasn't my initial thought process. What I'm saying is that people, whether it was my friends, my family, classmates, whatever, they didn't take me seriously until I made an attempt on my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that attempt happened, that's when people were like, oh, there's a problem. She's in trouble. She needs help. And when I look back on it, I really wish it didn't have to happen that way for people to finally recognize that something was going on with me. But of course, I don't place the blame on everyone outside of me. There's also blame with myself because with the way that I cope and manage with my emotions, a lot of it is inward. So I kind of hide a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that onus is on not only on like, my people outside of me, but also on myself as well. But I just really hate that it had to go down that way for me to get even into just in front of a therapist, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind speaking about what led up to that event?
Yeah, sure. So in college, I was in my senior year. So I graduated from college in 2016. And during that time, I broke up with my boyfriend at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also double majoring. So I have a dual BA.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, I was a part of the speech and debate team in college as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was double majoring. I was a part of the speech and debate team. I was living away from home. And, you know, I was just like involved in just a lot of different things. And then I was also going through like a pretty bad breakup.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt really overwhelmed. And because I hadn't learned positive emotional coping mechanisms, I just didn't know how to handle all of these like negative emotions that was brewing inside of me. So during that year, I just remember just feeling just so depressed. And it just reached a climax where I just attempted on my life. Now, I don't want to go into detail with that, but I made an attempt, and my family responded by bringing one of my relatives over to talk to me, which was okay. But at the same time, I was like, I don't know, this is the proper response. But I love them deeply for it because they were really trying. And so after that, I graduated college. I didn't go to the hospital at the time, I know, which is like, everyone's like, every time I say that. But I was like, look, it's different in the Black community, okay? Like, it's different. And so after college, shortly after, I actually got an internship at a gaming company. And so I was working there. And at the time that I was interning, I was also in a relationship with a different person. And when I started that internship, that relationship fell apart. The person broke up with me. And then also within that same week, I kid you not, within that same week, one of my good friends from college and we had like a horrible falling out.
Oh.
So I was going through not only like an intimate relationship breakup, but also just like a friendship, like a really bad friendship breakup.
Yeah.
In the same week, and while also starting this new job that I had. So I had like all three of those stressors going on. And I used to be on Snapchat at the time. I'm not on it anymore, honestly, because of this. But essentially, I made a like virtual like suicide note.
Oh.
And one of my friends saw it, then contacted my parents about it, which then my parents approached me about it and was like, why would you do that? Like, why would you broadcast it like that? And I'm just like, whoa, okay. And from there, that's when they were like, okay, you need to see somebody. And so they got a recommendation for a therapist from my friend's mom. And I started seeing that therapist then. And she was the one that gave me my first diagnosis, which was depression.
And so that was your first diagnosis of depression. And then what led to the other two?
So I didn't get my my diagnosis of BPD until 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, so 2018 was actually when I was hospitalized. And then shortly after my hospitalization, I got the diagnosis of BPD, but it wasn't told to me explicitly. Like, I had to literally ask and be like, hey, I think BPD kind of fits more of the symptoms I'm experiencing. And they're like, oh yeah, we know. And I was like, great. Like, were you ever going to tell me? Or, you know, surprise, you have BPD.
So you were hospitalized. Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love talking about this stuff. And so 2018, I was hospitalized. And I was hospitalized for, drum roll, please, suicide attempt. So, you know, I mean, like, kind of no surprise.
Yeah. That's
right.
3?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I was hospitalized in 2018 for, like about like the third suicide attempt. And which was like, finally, she's in there, you know? Like, I'm pretty sure like people are listening, like, finally, we got her. So I was in there, and I honestly had a polarizing experience in the hospital. And polarizing, what I mean by that is I was in 2 different hospitals that were drastically different from each other. So the first hospital that I went to was my county's mental hospital. And that place honestly like scared me. Like, and it was so uninviting, and it was just so cold, literally and figuratively there.
Mm-hmm.
And like they didn't have any activities for us to do. We didn't even really have beds to sleep in. We only had like these hospital chairs that recline.
What?
Yeah, there was like not really beds. It was just like, here's some like hospital chairs that recline, so just sleep here and you'll be okay. And then the food that we got was not too appetizing. Like if I had to put it on a scale, it was definitely worse than like school cafeteria food.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, and then there was just a lot of doctors and nurses running around, and it was probably because of the caseload, because there, at the time I was there was a lot of people in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they had only one shower, and I think only like one toilet, or like two bathrooms, but like one was for the men's and one was for the women's. And then there was a couple of like isolation rooms. Mm-hmm. So you'd only get put in the isolation rooms if you were like real bad, you know. Mm-hmm. But other than that, you would just mostly be sitting around hoping that a doctor comes talk to you and tells you where you're going to go. Because the county hospital that I was at, it was kind of more like a transfer kind of hospital. So it was more like a lot of like social workers and doctors working together to figure out where all of these patients are going to go. Mm-hmm. But it was just a horrifying experience for me, honestly. And I stayed one night there, luckily, because if I stayed there another night, I honestly don't think I would have been here right now.
Oh my. Yeah, I mean that makes sense. That doesn't sound like those were good conditions at all. Mm-hmm. And then the second hospital, what was that like?
So for the second hospital, that was like a utopia, honestly. like it was just night and day, honestly. Yeah. For the second hospital, it wasn't county owned. I think I think it's owned by like a nonprofit or something.
Okay.
And they actually had beds. They actually had bedrooms. You actually had bathrooms. You got like a toothbrush. You got toothpaste. You can like wash your clothes. Like there was a washer drying machine where you could like wash your clothes. They asked you like, hey, do you have any like dietary restrictions? And I was like, what? I was like, I can actually eat food that like is healthy for me and won't give me gas because I'm lactose intolerant. Like, I was like, this is wild. And then there was activities and there was support groups. And a lot of the patients there were actually around my age too, which was kind of nice. And I think they considered that part of the ward to be like with lower level patients in terms of, higher level in terms of like higher functioning. So it was a lot of us that were higher functioning, but were going through a very high symptomatic episode, or maybe attempted suicide, or maybe is in a period of mania. So it was just a really eclectic mix of people. And the staff was super nice, and you were assigned a therapist and a psychiatrist and even like a social worker. So it was a lot of like one-on-one attention as well.
That's great. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you got at least one of the at least one of them was good.
Right.
How did you transition back into like having a job and stuff? Was that difficult?
Yes, it was difficult because what tends to happen, or especially for me and from other stories that I've heard from my friends who've been in the hospital, is that they just are kind of like, okay, you're discharged, now you're on your way. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like, okay, now what? You know? And for me, I was actually put into an IOP program, an intensive outpatient program. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No, before. I haven't.
So IOP essentially is, how do I put it? Kind of like day school for people with mental illnesses. Like that's like the simplest way to put it. Sure. Like essentially it's like a 4-hour thing you do like Mondays through Fridays for however long your insurance will pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And my insurance, I think they only pay for maybe like a week or two.
Okay.
And so Mondays through Fridays, I think it was from like 9 a.m. to about 2 or something. Like you'd
Mm-hmm.
like go to this office building and you'd have a support group for this number, this amount of time. Then you'll have like a group activity for this amount of time. And then you'll
Mm-hmm.
have like a lecture. It was essentially like a lecture from like a therapist about a certain topic at this time. And then there's like another kind of breakout session at this time. And then you're sent on your way. Yeah, so it was essentially like a day school
Yeah.
for
Like,
for neurodivergence, essentially.
yeah. Yeah, like those programs that you get when you, at least for me, we go to the library and have an activity, and yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Did that help with the transition?
I would say it helped. Sadly, at the time that I was doing the IOP, I still wasn't in a great mental space.
Mm-hmm.
So I truly wasn't able to digest the information that I was given.
That makes sense.
So because this happened like immediately after I got out the hospital,
Mm.
you know. So I'm like, I get out the hospital, and then like the next day they're like, "You're in IOP, bye," and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds like a whirlwind.
Yeah, so it's like I'm just getting carted from essentially one building to another, and I didn't really feel like I had room to breathe either. And so like my mind just kind of felt like it was like constantly in a blender, where in IOP they were like, let's add in DBT skills, let's add in support group, let's add in this, and I'm just everything's just getting chopped together, and it's just all this like mushy, like this really mushy like smoothie that nobody wants to drink, you know. Like that's honestly how it was. Like that's how I looked at it. I was like, oh, is this my brain? I really don't want anything to do with this.
This is your brain on BBT.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so from my experience there, there was things I remember. So I'm not saying I was just like zoning out the whole time, but there were things that I took away. There were like some good I would kind of say like quote unquote friendships I made during that. And it did kind of help make my transition back into work a little bit easier. However, I do wish that in the IOP program that I was in, or in any sort of after inpatient program, that they have like a skills class regarding how to transition back into the workforce after being hospitalized.
Sure, yeah, that would be helpful.
Oh my God. Like, do you know how many lives we would save with that?
Absolutely.
Honestly. And and there was nothing clear about that. It was just more like, do self-care, make sure you change your thoughts and get some sleep and exercise and eat right. And I'm just like, okay, but like not everybody has the ability or access to do all these things.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to do all these things. But at the same time, like I needed to find a job. Like I needed money.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I was blessed to have parents that I could go back home to and live with. However, the environment for me at the time wasn't productive to my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I really pushed myself to essentially try and find a job so that I was able to move out on my own and just essentially just figure myself out and figure out my brain and how my brain works.
And I know you wrote a solo piece about having borderline. And did that happen immediately, or was that part of the process of like figuring out what was going on with your own mind?
Yes, it was definitely a part of the process. Definitely wasn't like I got out of the hospital and I was like, I'm going to write a piece. Like, some of us actors are just like, I had this experience, I must write about it, you know. But for me, I was like, I am way too in my head to be able to even be creative right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's, I think, one of the most agonizing things about the trope of like creativity comes from pain is because when you're in the pain, you generally can't make anything. And then you feel even worse because you're like, well, what good is this?
Right.
I'm not even making anything.
Right.
Which is a weird sort of, I think this root is almost capitalistic as well, of like, okay, well, my value is how much I'm putting out, which is not true, and it's hard to wrap your head around, you know?
Yeah, I truly believe that art and capitalism like cannot like coexist sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's like either, because when you start making your art and you're not, you know, profiting off of it, you know, then people are supporting you. You're like, oh my gosh, they're so radical, they're so amazing and transformative. But then as soon as you start making money, people are like, oh, you're a sellout.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
I was like, wait, so did you want me to starve? You know?
Which is it?
Yeah.
But this one person show or solo piece that you made, how did it happen?
Yeah. So, geez, how did it happen? Like, it's like, let me like rewind, because like I'm just stuck in pandemic mode, I'm gonna be honest. So
No, I fully understand.
so it was 2019, or I think it was actually late 2018, because I was at least in my job, at least like months into my new job, or my current job that I'm in now. And and I was doing one woman shows through a class here in San Francisco called Solo Performance Workshop. Shout out to Martha Reinberg. And I did her class like about twice. So I came up with like 2 one-woman shows. And they both touched on my experience with depression. And at the time, I had the BPD diagnosis, but I didn't know how to wrap my head around it, you know, because BPD is so misunderstood, in that when I did my research about it, you know, most of the top Google articles that popped up were like, why people with BPD are harmful, or like how to avoid like getting into a relationship with a person with BPD. Like, it was blogs like that. And so I was like, I don't want to talk about this. Let's just kind of put it on the back burner for a minute. And so I did 2 shows just related to my experience with depression, because I'm like, that's digestible, right? And so I think it was late 2018, one of my solo performance castmates, they sent me an email and they're like, hey, there's this lady that's looking to put on a solo performance showcase of actors with mental illness, and I think you should apply. And I was like, huh? This is so hyper specific. It's like what? And so the lady, who's Tony Weingarten, she wanted to do a showcase of just actors or just people who had mental illness, because she also went through a severe depression episode herself when she was younger. So she's just wanted to put this sort of troupe together. And I was like, okay. And Tony, in her, I guess, application, she wrote, you know, we really want a range of mental illnesses. We want like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, like, you know, what have you. And I was like, okay. And I guess in my mind, for some reason, I was like, I guess maybe I should mention I had BPD, so I look different from everybody else.
Yeah.
I was like, well, let's give it a try.
Trying to make a splash.
Right. I was like, you know, I guess BPD can make an appearance now. This is totally appropriate. And
today's performance of depression will be played by borderline personality disorder.
Right. It's like, yay. And so I auditioned for Tony, and there was kind of like a little interview kind of afterwards. She's like, oh, so, you know, what are you like diagnosed with, or what do you have? And I was like, well, I have BPD. And she's like, oh, BPD, what's that? And I was like, oh, wow, I actually have to like explain it. And I was like, oh gosh, now I'm really put on the spot. But but essentially after that process, she called me up and she was like, hey, you're in the show. And I was like, great. Now what? You know? And I essentially wrote the show with her, and at least it was like it was me and 3 other people and Tony. So Tony did hers about depression. Like we had someone do theirs about like anxiety, another one for bipolar, and then, you know, there was me with BPD. So I essentially wrote the show within the troupe, and they helped me edit it. We also had a director, shout out to Mark Kenward, and he helped us stage it, and that's how my BPD show, I guess, came about.
That's great. That's it's really cool that you had the ability to work with others about that. I'm sure that must have made you feel very supported.
Yes, and a lot, pretty much most of the troupe, except one person, were all actors, or at least had like creative backgrounds.
Sure.
So it was just a lot easier to connect with them, like not only on having a mental illness, but also being an actor or actress with mental health issues.
Do you still feel like a lot of pressure from culturally to like not talk about this, and how do you navigate that if you do?
I do feel culturally there's still some pressure to not talk about it, but right now I think the pressure is kind of off now because of our current situation with like police brutality and like anti-racism and all those protests that are going on. I truly feel like there's a lot more psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, just any mental health professional, especially our Black mental health professionals, they're stepping up and they're saying, hey, we know you're out there protesting and like fighting, for essentially your right to live, but you need to make sure you are taking care of your mental health.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us in the Black community are just saying enough is enough. Our life is ours, our mental health matters. So I truly think 2020 is the year for Black people as a community to really focus on mental health and to stop saying, oh, God's got it, or like, I can handle it myself. Like, we're truly like, we need to heal and we need to figure out how to get our mental health together.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Do you think there's inherent and inherited trauma from just like being a Black person in America?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, slavery in America happened for at least 400 years.
Yeah.
So that's a long time.
That is a bit. That is a bit of time.
Like that's a lot of generational trauma.
Yeah.
On our backs. And then not only that, but then there was also, like this Jim Crow laws, segregation laws, and then civil rights movement. So that's like probably like another like 50, 60 years added on to that. And then if I added my own age to that, which is 25, that's another 25 years on top of
that.
So, we're talking like 475 years of generational trauma. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's just for me alone.
Yeah.
And so there's just a lot of generational trauma, not only just from our ancestry, but like within like our own families. Like, there's stuff that happens within your family that can get carried down to you, that can even kind of like alter the way that your body reacts to stress.
Yeah.
Because trauma literally like alters the way that your brain reacts to stress. So I truly do think it's a problem.
I see you interacting on Twitter with a few really great organizations, and the way we got connected is I was looking for specifically mental health services for Black people and to promote and to support. And you seem to be involved with a lot of like new applications and websites designed specifically around the mental health of Black people and Black people in America specifically. How did you get involved with those people?
I got involved through my now really good friend. Her name's Amade, and she owns Depressed While Black. I don't know if you've so you've probably seen it around on social media, but she's a founder of Depressed While Black, and I actually got connected to her through an article I read that was an interview with her. And in that interview, she mentioned that she was living in San Francisco at the time, and she was working at a mental health nonprofit there. And I was like, what? She's in San Francisco? Oh my gosh, I have to meet her. You know, she's just this like lovely, just brave and just bold Black woman. And I was just like, oh, I need to meet her. And so I was super nervous, but like I slid into her DMs and I was like, hey, so I'm trying to connect with more people that look like me that also, you know, suffer from some mental illness. So you want to kind of connect? You know, like try to I literally like shoot my shot. I shot my shot with her, you know. Yeah. So and she was just like, yeah, oh my gosh, please. And we met up and it was just like instant chemistry. Fantastic. So and so through her and through following her Twitter account and, you know, through Twitter's algorithm, they recommend other accounts. And so then I just started following these other like Black mental health professionals and then these other Black mental health nonprofits. And I was just following them and I would just start interacting with them. And then we would just get into this kind of rapport. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I like, and I like talked to Amade one day and I'm like, am I like a part of the mental health community now? And then she was just like, yeah, you're like a mental health advocate. And I was like, I could just call myself that? She's like, yeah. I was like, can you like knight me or something? Like mental health advocate, like make it official. And she's like, okay, I knight you as a mental health advocate. Like, now go away, you know?
Yeah, I have things to do.
Yeah, it's like whatever. Like just put it on your bio. That's it. Bye. Okay. She's like, and it's so funny because like I mean, like I hope she listens to this podcast. Amade, I see you as a big sister, okay? So, like she's like a couple years older than me, but I really do look up to her and all like the amazing work that she's doing through Depressed While Black. Like she actually delivers personal care items to mental health hospitals in North Carolina. So, you know, because for Black patients in the inpatient hospitals, there's not like a lot of personal care products for us. Like, there's not really like lotion. There's no like satin bonnets for us to wear at night. You know, there's no combs that actually work in our hair. And through Depressed While Black, Amade gets donations to buy like wide tooth combs, satin bonnets, just like fantastic. Clean underwear and like donates them to inpatient hospitals that she's in connection with.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Switching gears a little bit, has your mental health ever stopped you from being creative and making things besides, you know, being in a hospital?
Yes, always, constantly. If there's any person out there that's a creative that has either a mental illness or just severe mental health issues, if they say no, be suspicious. I was like, you're not human. God. Like, yes, of course. Of course. Like, even through the making of my show about BPD, which is called Who Wants to Be Neurotypical, even making that show, there was times, and Tony can attest to this, honestly, there was times I came to our rehearsal and they were like, okay, so what do you got today? And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't write today because I was suicidal, or like I didn't write today because like my mental health is tanking right now and I'm having high symptomalities. But what was amazing through that process was, although my creativity was stymied, I was working with a group of people who were like me, so they were actually able to sort of kind of dig through the rubble like with me and just sort of sit with me in it. And they're not sitting there like, oh, you don't have anything, okay, up next, who's next? You know, they're just like, oh, okay, well, why don't you talk about that? And I was like, what, you want me to talk about me feeling suicidal? Like, what? You know, like, well, you want me to talk about that? And so like I would actually talk about it, and then through and then they actually had me record myself talking about it. And through recording, and when I listened back to it, I was like, oh wow, I actually have some like pretty great insights that I can incorporate into my show. And that actually sparked my creativity, or like reignited my creativity to, you know, finish that show. And the end product is now what you see on YouTube.
Yeah. In general, how do you navigate around your mental health when it does prevent you from creating? Like, that's a very good specific example, but what if someone doesn't have a support group? Have you ever had to navigate it on your own?
Yes, I still do navigate it on my own when it comes to my creativity. How I do that is sometimes I actually utilize a technique that I learned from the group. And when I'm having just a really horrible mental health day where I can't even like lift a foot out of bed, sometimes I'll just start talking to myself and just record myself talking to myself. And when I'm ready to listen to it, I'll listen back to it. And sometimes it sparks creativity, and sometimes it's just a moment of reflection for me. And what I want to say here is that it's totally okay if you don't feel creative. Like, you don't always need to monetize every single thing that you do. You don't need to monetize your hobbies all the time. And if it's a day where your creativity is just like, you just just let it be. And the more that you focus on being more gentle with yourself during that time, your creativity will come back. Like, it will come back because you are taking care of yourself so that your mind is ready to be open for that creative opportunity.
Makes sense to me. As an actor, you're portraying different people, right?
Right.
And one of the symptoms of borderline is that you have a looser sense of self. Do you think that contributes to the desire to be an actor?
So the BPD symptom I think you're referring to is like the unstable sense of self, like sense of identity. And does that contribute to me wanting to be an actress? There's a little part of me that's kind of like, now that you say that, maybe. Like, maybe. But on the like, one side of it is probably true, where I kind of sought out acting because I was like, yay, I can finally portray somebody else that's not me, But then the other side that's true is I actually like acting for acting, not just because I get to be somebody else, but like, I just like the space. I like the atmosphere and like the feelings that I get from being on stage or in front of a camera, or even just like now, like talking to you. Like, I love this. This is great. So thinking dialectically, Marsha Linehan, thinking dialectically about this, where both of these opposites are true, where like, yeah, I do acting because of, based on a BPD symptom of an unstable sense of self, and I actually like acting for acting. Like, the medium here is, yes, I do have BPD, but that doesn't negate the fact that I like acting for acting.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that tracks. You just said dialectically. What does that mean?
Dialectically, oh gosh. My old DBT teacher will probably kill me for butchering this. But so I've taken DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. And I'm probably going to butcher it, so sorry, kids. But just, you got Google, so look it up. Look it up, people. But so DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, is essentially a type of therapy that was specifically created for people with BPD. And the goal is to quote create a life worth living. And so to be dialectical is to acknowledge your reason mind and your emotion mind in hopes to come to a wise mind decision. So if you're kind of thinking of it in a sort of Venn diagram, like with the two circles and the intersecting part, on one side you have your reason mind or rational mind. So this is just very logical, straight to the facts, like no emotions involved there. And then on the other side, you have your emotion mind, which is all the emotions, all the feels. And for people, we tend to sort of kind of flow one way or the other. And for people with BPD, we definitely flow one way or the other. Like we have what's called like black and white thinking. So we don't really see the gray in things. It's just like, it's either this or that. That's it. So we're either in rational mind or we're in emotion mind. And so DBT helps bridge the two to bring you in the middle to wise mind, which is like the intersecting part of the Venn diagram. And so to be dialectical is essentially to make more wise mind decisions.
Okay. What would your biggest piece of advice be for someone who has been recently diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and is trying to make like art or media or content?
So my biggest piece of advice to someone who has been diagnosed with BPD, who's trying to make art or some sort of media, is don't Google BPD, please. don't do it. Don't do it if you want to be disappointed. Like only Google when you're ready, honestly. Like Google when you are in your wise mind and you are in an emotionally stable place and your distress is low. Then you can Google BPD. Otherwise, if you have BPD and you're trying to make media, my other piece of advice is to make sure you slow down. Because when it comes to stuff in the media, and I work in social media marketing, which is kind of ironic, but when it comes to media, a lot of things are happening fast. It's quick. And how a lot of people react on social media, I would kind of condense it down to either emotional mind or rational mind.
Yeah.
So like when you see that sort of sensational headline, like there's people being like reacting to it emotionally, like, oh no, not again. Like this happened because I'm feeling like this. Or people react to it strictly like logically, like, well, these are the facts and this and this is that, without really taking into account like the human side, of what's going on. So for someone who has BPD, who's trying to make art or is in the media or whatever, you got to make sure you stay dialectical about what you're doing. And that know that you don't need to always be in emotion mind just to make your art. Like how you were saying earlier, Tristan, about, art comes from pain. For those of us with BPD who are trying to make art or just be in the media space, know that we don't always need to be in the emotion mind to get the content that we need. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't go triggering yourself into like an emotional episode to get that content. Like, it's not worth it because we know as people with BPD, we have what's called a slow return to baseline. So, which essentially means that once we are triggered from an event, our baseline sits at I guess you would say maybe a lower level than probably normal. So to return to that, it takes us longer. For someone who's neurotypical and may get triggered by an event, it'll like, if you look at it like as a line graph, it'll like spike, and then it'll like, come back down. Versus for someone with BPD, it'll spike, and then like it might plateau for a little bit, plateau, and then slowly come down, either like hour by hour or day by day or week by week. So because we have that, it's very important for us as people with BPD in the media to be aware of that and to know that it's okay to make art from a wise mind place, and it's okay to be patient with ourselves during this time too.
Besides therapy, what other measures do you use to cope with on a day-to-day basis with your condition?
Well, I'm on medication, but it's not specifically for BPD because there's no medication available for folks with BPD.
Right.
But I'm on an antidepressant because I still have depression.
Mm-hmm.
So that medication at the very least helps me be able to just get out of bed and complete just my everyday activities. Then the next thing that I do, and I know we hate hearing this, but like I actually had to alter my diet, not because of my mental health, but also because of like for health related reasons. Like I'm kind of in the pre-diabetic range. Okay. So I had to alter my diet too. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. And then at the same time, because I'm in that area, and I'm only 25 and I'm in this pre-diabetic range. And because of that, I've also had to increase my exercise, which has actually been helpful too.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I do, so besides like the whole like sleeping, exercising, and eating, you know, that everybody kind of throws at you all the time, which we know is helpful, but you know, give us some actual things to do, you know, that we want to do, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so in terms of things that help me that are things that I want to do, I always try to make sure that there is one thing that I do every day that I'm looking forward to. Like I try to schedule that in every day. So whether that's like, the new season of Pose came out on Netflix, I want to make sure I watch an episode tonight. Or it's like, my favorite YouTuber just posted a new video, I want to make sure I watch that maybe today or tomorrow or this week. You really just have to tap in and figure out what makes you happy. Is it just going outside and sitting out there for 30 minutes? Factor that into your day. Factor that into your life every day if you can. Is it just watching your favorite YouTuber or Twitch streamer? Like, try to factor that in somehow. Is it eating cake? Great. But make sure you do it mindfully and within like your calorie range for your body. Yeah. You know, so you just have to, I honestly feel like that's like the number one thing is like once you kind of have that habit of making sure you do one thing that you enjoy, whether it's as small as just sitting outside in the sun or maybe as big as like writing a blog post, like you factor that in. And I truly think that'll help decrease sort of negative symptoms and sort of build what Dr. Rashida Walker calls psychological like fortitude, so that you feel really confident in yourself.
It's good advice, and I want to thank you for sharing it, and thank you for being on. Unless there's anything else you want to say, I'm good on my end.
I guess the last thing I'll say is for my folks with BPD, or if you're just Black and you're having just mental health struggles, there is a place on Reddit for you. So there's a subreddit that's called r/Black mental health. And that's a subreddit that I created a couple months ago. And it's grown to about 1,300 members now, though we post articles about different types of self-care. We post articles about what to expect when you're going to your first therapy session. And we post resources pertaining to how to find a therapist, how to manage and cope with your emotions, other mental health subreddits that exist on Reddit. Like we have that all in that subreddit. And then we also have space for people to just vent and just support each other, like with whatever they're going through. And we just have this just really eclectic group of Black people. Like there's Black people mixed with Black, and there's Black people mixed with like either they're Latinx or they're mixed with white, or we just have this eclectic group of just like BIPOC people in there. And we even have like non-Black allies that are in there. They're mostly lurkers, but they're in there too, and they're just like learning and just digesting the content, because a lot of them message me actually, and they're like, how can I be like a better ally for my friend who's going through mental health struggles and they're Black? Like, I really don't want to minimize their experience, because I have mental health issues too, but I know there's nuances. So like, how can I do that? And I was like, just join the subreddit and just lurk. Okay. Just don't post, just look. Okay. Like,
I think that's good advice in general for white people these days, is don't post, just lurk.
Yeah. Like not like, don't like just lurk, but just more like, just listen. Like just listen. Like, it's okay. Sit back, digest the information, listen, ask questions, but listen.
100%. But that's great. I'm glad you're championing that resource. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on.